Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda, and please welcome to our Operation Freedom platform, WeThePeopleProcessing.com. You know, are you tired of being threatened to be canceled just because you have a company focused on liberty and freedom? Well, worry no more, folks. WeThePeopleProcessing.com is your go-to merchant services, freedom-based company to provide business service payment solutions. We the People Processing provides their clients a cancel culture-free platform which is domestically based. They provide competitive rates, no contracts with next-day funding, a fully vetted and like-minded financial infrastructure, and full support for integrations, implementation, and e-commerce efforts. Bottom line, WeThePeopleProcessing.com focuses on defending your company's free market growth, values, and future. Check them out at www.WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Once you're on the site, enter in password Operation Freedom or call 855-499-2024. That's WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Then, when on the website, enter Operation Freedom as your password or call 855-499-2024. My next guest is someone who's a very dear friend and someone who is your very dear friend because he has focused on your freedom and your liberty and outing the deep state, the thugocracy, the New World Order crowd, the globalist syndicate, the criminal international banking syndicate, whatever you want to, the city of London, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same. They're all focused on stripping you of your freedom, your liberty, your life, your health, your future, and our constitutional republic. And Harley Schlanger has had incredible perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice in putting your interests ahead of his own and educating and empowering you in the process. Harley has been the spokesman for LaRouche since 1999. Harley has written extensively on a number of issues, including financial fraud, as far back as the mid-1980s in the savings and loan crisis with Michael Milliken and junk bonds. Harley has also covered the effects of banking deregulation, the shift of the United States from a productive manufacturing economy to a speculative casino economy. By the way, that benefits the syndicate, not you, not our republic, but the syndicate. Harley is often interviewed on radio programs such as this and many other radio programs around the world on topics ranging from financial fraud to reversing the crisis with a return to the American system of physical economics. Harley has lectured widely on these topics on campuses throughout the United States and Europe. Website, LaRoucheOrganization.com, LaRouche organization.com. It's my honor to introduce and have back on our platform Harley Schlanger. Harley, welcome back to the Operation Freedom Show and platform.
Hi, Dave. I'm always happy to be with you.
You know, Harley, many people, when I speak about this New World Order crowd, they said, you know, this is conspiracy theory. This isn't. I want to play a brief clip from globalist extraordinaire George H.W. Bush. He gave this speech in the Oval Office in around the 1992 time frame. I just want to play this brief clip and get your reaction, Harley.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Harley, your take.
Well, that whole idea is collapsing.
It is.
Collapsing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a growing panic among the people who are the advocates of what Bush is talking about, which they now call the rules-based order. This is the Davos crowd. It's the City of London. They've run the world into the ground. And for some reason, they think military operations might scare enough countries to continue to stick with their system. But I want to focus on two sets of conferences that are taking place right now. The globalists are meeting with the G7 in Bavaria the next couple of days. They just had a European Union heads of state meeting. They will also have a NATO meeting in Madrid at the end of the month, where they're about to identify what they call global NATO. Now, at the same time, something that very few Americans know about, the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, had a conference where they discussed a new financial system. They discussed a financial system based on what are, in reality, the principles of the American system of physical economy. Most interesting in this was Putin's address. Putin has been speaking quite often recently on what's going on with the Western economy. And he made a quip: the only thing they seem to have that's producing anything is the money printing machines of the central banks. What he then said is blaming Russia for inflation is crazy. The inflation is the result of failed and bad monetary policies by the caretakers of the Western system. And he went on to talk about the zero interest rates, the buildup of a speculative bubble, of an unsustainable debt. In fact, Dave, he sounded a lot like you and me in his speech at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And then he went beyond that at the BRICS meeting in Beijing, where he said, we're talking about a new foreign exchange system, which could include the dollar, but would also be based on other currencies. And this is what's in the works right now, because unlike the nonsense that people in the West are reading in the press about the wonderful struggle in Ukraine and how Russia's collapsing, actually it's the West that's collapsing. We're undergoing an economic collapse, inflation, supply chain breakdowns. This has nothing to do with Putin. All of this, and it has nothing to do with COVID. All of this was in full steam ahead since 2008. And on top of that, according to people like Scott Ritter, Colonel Richard Black, Douglas McGregor, the Ukraine war is lost. The only question is how many more Ukrainians will be killed while NATO continues its buildup and attempt to destroy Russia. So this is an extraordinary moment where our enemies, the globalists that you talked about in the introduction, are on the defensive. They don't have the support anymore of countries like India, even Brazil, which they thought they had with Bolsonaro. Brazil is breaking to support Russia and China. Nigeria, Algeria, Argentina wants to join the BRICS. Indonesia, I think the 5th largest country in the world in population, wants to join the BRICS. And what are we doing with the G7? We're giving observer status to Zelensky. So I think the moment has come where people should stop being pessimistic and take an aggressive policy position. And what we're doing, just to move this ahead, is we've issued a call. Helga Zepp-LaRouche drafted a call for a new Bretton Woods conference to take what worked with the Bretton Woods system, the fixed exchange rates, the gold reserve, to return to that, to get away from the speculative casino economy, but then fix the problems with the Bretton Woods system, which was largely that it was run through the City of London using the International Monetary Fund to keep the poor countries poor and the billionaires rich. So this is going out starting today. We're trying to get signatures on it. We've had a couple of extraordinary conferences with speakers from Russia, from China, from Italy, from India, from South Africa. The Schiller, you can see these at the schillerinstitute.com. So I think this is a moment of fundamental change. And the question is, will Americans allow themselves to be pulled into small fights? And I'm not saying that small fights are unimportant, such as the question of abortion and the question of gun rights and the question of, there are all sorts of Black Lives Matter, all sorts of issues. But here we have a chance to bankrupt the people who are using these issues to divide us. And I think that's where we have to focus our attention.
Well, Harley, you mentioned the abortion issue and the gun rights issue, 2 decisions that came out Thursday and Friday of this week. And the question is that I pose to people, why do you think these decisions happened now? Why do you think these cases came forward now? Roe versus Wade occurred in 1973. Why now? And I believe, and I'll answer my own question, Harlan, you can tell me if I'm off. I believe the reason why these decisions came forward now is because the syndicate has come to the realization that people were awakened to their agenda and what they have been up to for decades, and that they have become awakened mainly because of organizations like yours and what we do here at Operation Freedom and what other people do in the independent media, and bringing forward the realization about the divide and conquer strategy. And the syndicate has become panicked because people are looking at the landscape of the world and saying, wait a minute, this deflationary environment, this baby food formula shortage, the supply chain issues, the $5 a gas for regular, the diesel at $8, the Afghanistan situation, this war in Russia, Ukraine, the $59 billion that Biden has sent over since February 24th into a black hole that nobody can attest to where all that money went to the Hunter Biden left. People have, and they were panicked that people were now, wait a minute, this is a problem. And people were coming together and they needed to try to create division. And that's why these cases came forward at this precise time. That's my contention, Harley. Am I off?
No, I think you're right. I think the whole question of identity politics, the attempt to divide people into left and right, socialist versus American capitalist, these are bogus issues. The real issue is the question of our constitutional principles. Mm-hmm. And this is where, look, we haven't declared war yet, have we, against Russia?
No.
So how can we justify $60 billion worth of weapons
right,
going, in many cases, to militia units that are being decimated? Mm-hmm. You know, Putin said he had two objectives. One is to keep Ukraine out of NATO, and secondly, to keep offensive weapons out of the hands of neo-Nazi units that were killing ethnic Russians in the Donbass. He's on the verge of mopping up the Nazi units. And you know, it's really interesting. If you look at the media, they still say, well, this is an exaggeration. There aren't really Nazis.
No.
And yet you see the stories coming out from Europe, mm-hmm, from insiders who are in the Donbass, talking about the Azov battalion, which just decided to stop using Nazi insignias. And the way the London Times reported that is that this is good because it will take away a Russian propaganda point. Not, are they rebranding? That's what they're doing. Excuse me, it chokes me up to think about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I just wrote an article. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it.
Oh, no, it's a fantastic call entitled Western War Narrative Takes a Beating in the Donbass. Educate our listeners because it's a fascinating article.
Well, here I took a couple of things from the British press. The Royal United Services Institute, which is the oldest defense think tank in Britain. It's the monarchy's think tank. And also the new chief of the army did presentations in the last couple of days where they said, look, we have to fight Russia, and we may have to fight Russia with British troops in Ukraine, but we don't have an industrial economy to support this. And they said, neither does the United States. The idea of the arsenal for democracy doesn't exist anymore. Russia has a much more developed industrial capability that can feed a war economy than the West. Mm-hmm. Now, what are they talking about? They're talking about, forget the 60 billion. We need trillions of dollars to be spent on arms. And what does that also mean? People are going to have to sacrifice. And it's interesting that at the same time they're putting out these stories, and the RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, is not meant for the common person. That's meant to organize the elites and the establishment and telling them, here's what you have to do. But what's happening in Great Britain right now? There's a rail strike because people can't afford gas. Let me just tell you what the German economics minister announced on Friday. He said Germany might face a Lehman Brothers effect in the energy system. He said the breakdown due to cost of delivery of energy from utilities to municipal utilities, then eventually to businesses, industry, and consumers. Gas bills for homes are going to double or triple by the end of this month because they're already passing on gas increases from last fall, and they expect the gas price to quadruple. What's going to be left of the German economy? How can the German economy produce arms for Ukraine that either get destroyed by Russian missiles or captured by the Russians as soon as they get to Ukraine?
Oh, and right. And so Harley, play this out over the ensuing weeks and months.
Well, what's going to happen probably in the United Kingdom soon is they're going to use Boris Johnson as a sacrificial lamb, which is what they often do in these cases. And it means we'll have someone else who's just as bad, but maybe not as personally corrupt. In the United States, we're headed toward ungovernability. The Biden administration has no strategy for fighting inflation except turning it over to the Federal Reserve, which I would argue is largely responsible for the inflation we have with their quantitative easing policy, pumping trillions of dollars into the hands of speculators while the physical economy is deteriorating, declining, the farm sector is being dismantled, and so on. So in the United States, it's not the Roe v. Wade or the gun issue. It's the fact that people won't be able to feed themselves or afford gasoline. And the question is, who has a solution to that?
Right.
The Republican Party, Mitch McConnell and others, their solution is austerity.
Right.
That's not a solution. That protects Wall Street.
Right.
So we need to figure out how to choke off the credit that's going to these banks. And that's why we've called for an organized bankruptcy reorganization, top down, starting with J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, the banks that got the trillions of dollars from the repo markets. That is, the Fed created trillions of dollars since September 2019 to pump into the biggest banks that are technically bankrupt because they're holding debts that can't be covered. And meanwhile, they're getting the free money to give to their clients to pay those debts, to keep those debts current. What does that mean? Their debt is getting bigger. So how is this going to stop inflation? How could you trust Yellen and Jerome Powell, the last two chiefs of the Federal Reserve, both of whom said that we're not going to have much inflation, it'll be transitory. Oh, gee, I guess we missed it. Yeah, your children may be missing meals because these guys went ahead and bailed out their cronies at the banks that own the Federal Reserve while cutting off funds for necessary programs, investment in infrastructure, investment in energy, and investment in agriculture. So that's why this call for a new Bretton Woods, we have to rally the American people around the big issues that will make a difference. And a Glass-Steagall style organized bankruptcy of these bankrupt banks and financial institutions is the best starting point, because these are the same people who are pushing for wars and who are using the divide and conquer strategy to keep us from having a national mission.
And what was one of the first things Biden did today at the G7? He announces, we're going to put a moratorium on buying gold from Russia. And I'm sure Putin looked at that and heard that and goes, oh, okay, that really worked well on the energy side, and that worked perfect, right? We'll stick with our physical assets that we're going to back our ruble in. And frankly, if we're going to sell it, we'll sell gold to India. We're happy to do that. So I'm happy to sell it to China. I mean, this is so ludicrous, Harley.
It's the lack of a strategy and the lack of an alternative. So they're coming up with anything they can. I mean, the idea that Putin caused the inflation. Putin made a joke at one of his recent speeches. He said, well, I didn't realize that I'm already running U.S. policy.
And also that speech he got, I've gone through that speech 3 or 4 times now that Putin gave in St. Petersburg. And it is chocked full of actually really insightful analysis of what's happening, not just in Russia, but what's happening worldwide.
Well, Dave, this is coming out now from all over the world. I just got invited to do a television show in Algeria tomorrow where they want my report on what's going on with the G7 meeting. and why the G7 is a declining institution, where the BRICS now have a larger group of countries in terms of economy than the G7. You know, what Putin is looking at is the suicide of Europe, the self-suicide of Europe. And he said it repeatedly, and the Europeans are still saying, oh, we're going to win this war. We're going to keep doing this until Ukraine wins. And then they admit that Ukraine's army is decimated. They're running out of troops. Meanwhile, all this money that's going into these arms that may or may not be delivered, that's going on to the credit, or the bill, I should say, the debt of Ukraine, which is already insolvent.
So, Harley, then our listeners are asking, okay, what can they do to subvert the globalist agenda? What can they do to support your efforts and the efforts of, if you will, bringing back some semblance of financial stability, not just to their own home, but to their country and the world?
Well, Dave, I'll send you this call we're putting out for convening a new Bretton Woods conference. You can post it on your website. If people want to get it from me, they can write to me at my personal email, which I'll give you in a moment, and I'll send it to you. Study it. It's not long, but it has specific points of legislation that could be enacted in the United States and measures that can be taken by a group of sovereign nations working together. Now, here's the irony. The Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, the South Africans, the Brazilians, they're already moving in this direction. This is the direction of the old American system. What's missing is America and Europe. I think Europe's going to go through an incredible crisis. In the United States, I think if we get people who are waking up to address these big issues, and these are big issues, and people say, well, I want something simple. Isn't there something simple we can do? No, this country's been subverted for 50 years. Right. The education system has destroyed people's ability to think, the entertainment system and so on, the rock, sex, drug counterculture. So take a little time to study some ideas that go back to the founding of our country. We're coming up on July 4th, a perfect opportunity for people to think about what went into the American Revolution. So circulate our resolution, study it, get people to endorse it, get state senators and local city councilmen to endorse it, and let's build some momentum to swing the United States back to the American system. So if people write to me and ask for it, I'll gladly send the link. It's harleysch@gmail.com, harleysch@gmail.com.
Harley, in our final 2 minutes, what's going to be the biggest surprise that happens on the world stage, do you believe, over the next several months?
Well, I think we're going to see some compromise worked out where they'll basically bring Zelensky off the center stage and come up with either a coup in Ukraine or the European Union and NATO saying, okay, let's end this war. Because I think there's some sane people who realize that if you keep provoking Russia, the war is going to spread into Central and Western Europe. So I think the Ukraine situation has shifted. Now, the NATO command is still saying we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Will the Ukrainians say that? Is there going to be a change inside that country? And I hope so